come to the fourth and final review in my look back at the entire Troll series. A group of movies that revolve around trolls. We've seen trolls, goblins, and trees in 3 different films that were never intended to be interlinked with each other. So isn't it appropriate that I'm now reviewing the 4th installment that actually is a 4th installment, but to another completely different film series? Let's go back a little bit to the year 1982, when Conan the Barbarian pillaged through the box office. Joe D'Amato, a blacklisted European writer, figured, hey, I'm sure there's deserts around here somewhere. I'm sure we got some rock-hard, bare-chested men here in Italy. Why not make our own Conan-style series of films? And make those movies he did, starting, of course, in the year of Conan, 1982, with Ator the Invincible, starring Miles O'Keefe. That film proved to be such a success in Europe that a second Ator film was set in motion. Of course, even if the first wasn't a success, 1984 was the year of Conan the Destroyer, so naturally, that meant there had to be an Ator sequel. Regardless. At first, the sequel was widely known here in the States as The Blade Master. That is until 1991, when it became better known under another title.
Cave Dwellers, wasn't he in...
Cave Dwellers. It's the name of the movie.
A D'Amato-less third installment called Iron Warrior was released, with Joe D'Amato completely disregarding its existence. Think about that for a minute. Joe D'Amato, one of the kings of the European cash-in genre, the man who brought us Caligula, the Untold Story, and his own line of Emmanuel films, trashed this movie for being a cash-in. That's sort of like Bruno Mattei disregarding the existence of Dawn of the Dead. And I think a nucleus just exploded in my brain. So D'Amato returned in 1990 to bring us Ator 4, aka Ator 3, asshole. But it's most commonly known as Quest for the Mighty Sword. This is the only Ator film not to feature Miles O'Keefe in the chestular role, which could possibly mean he was still riding high on that Inglorious Bastards 2 money. Instead, Eric Allen Kramer was given the Ator role based on his performance 2 years prior in the TV movie The Incredible Hulk Returns, in which Kramer played Thor. I'd like to think that D'Amato never actually saw that movie. He only gave Kramer the role because Thor sounds a little bit like Ator. That would make the most sense because look at this guy. He looks about as much like Miles O'Keefe as Jude Law looks like Brian Dennehy. What the hell, is he balding on top? Is that a double chin? Ator's put on a little weight this time too. Either that or his breastplate is just held up with bags of pudding. Maybe they just built a Denny's right next to the castle, and Ator likes to chase his Western burger with whatever he bought from the Chili's, which they've also built. What the hell, he can't even bend down to pick up this weapon? He just used his sword the same way an old lady would have used it to pick up her keys. This guy's turn as Ator makes about as much sense as doing a Point Break 2 and replacing Patrick Swayze with Philip Seymour Hoffman. Wait, hang on. What the hell just happened? Sorry, I was too busy being a smartass to pay attention to the movie. Did Ator just die? That is Ator, right?
He accepts Prince Ator's sentence.
Okay, Prince Ator. Don't remember him being royalty in the previous films, but maybe that's what they did with the missing Prince Adam plot in Masters of the Universe. They just inserted it here. So Ator dies, and he leaves his sword of power to his son, also named Ator, and the boy and the Ator widow flee the castle before they're killed. What's going on here? Is this a fucking prequel? Or is older Ator here supposed to be the aged Ator from the previous films? Joe D'Amato has the fucking storytelling abilities of a narcoleptic. Before I go any further, we need to discuss where Troll 3 comes from. The German translation of the film's title comes out to Troll 3, The Sword of Power. It isn't that uncommon for rare markets to take other foreign movies and attach their own alternate titles to them to make it sound like they're a sequel to something completely unrelated. But whenever this happens, it isn't like those alternate titles are commonly known. And if they are, they're quickly forgotten, like 1975's The Possessor, aka Exorcist 3. But in the case of this Troll 3 alternate title, you can actually see a trailer of it with the Troll label. The first 3 Troll movies had the linking plot device of plants throughout them, either with plants being used as pods or as fucking killers. This movie, it doesn't have the plants, but it has a little something else to link the stories. The same fucking mask from Troll 2. That's right. It's got a fucking goblin mask in it. So naturally, the fact that the movie's got a goblin makes it a sequel to Troll? On the IMDb page, it even says that this movie follows all of the Ator movies and all of the Troll movies. How confusing is that for someone just going into this page blindly? Why don't you just say that Spider-Man 3 follows Daredevil, Fantastic Four, Hulk, and Citizen Toxie? You know, because they all have Stan Lee in them. It makes me wonder how, of all the masks in Troll 2, they settled on this one. Did D'Amato just pick it at random? Or did he say, I specifically want the one that looks like Red Fox? In this movie, the goblin's name is Grendel. And guess what? They have him talk! Bitch, bitch, wake up, bitch! Okay, you got me. That's not his real voice.
That is why we have no children. No, you wouldn't have cried out if I had been a handsome blonde prince.
That is fucking horrifying looking. This thing's mouth moves with the ease of watching someone with their lips melted off, saying only B words. Ator Jr. and his mother meet up with Grendel when they're hiding out, and Grendel agrees to raise the boy, but only if Ator's mother puts out for him. I really don't like where this is going.
You gotta pay the troll toll. If you want to get into that boy's hole, you gotta pay the troll toll to get in. You want the baby boy's hole, you gotta pay the troll toll. You gotta pay the troll toll to get in.
Ator's mom agrees to sleep with Grendel so he can raise Ator. I'm starting to think that Ator's mother is the kind who makes poor decisions. Just because you had a nice husband does not mean that every person who wants to fuck you should be raising your kids. Ew, ew, thanks movie. I always wanted to see Bernadette Peters make out with a squash. What? Who's this now? Oh, okay, it's new Ator. I guess we're years into the future then. This movie is absolutely terrible at making any kind of time cut. They could have faded to white and then jumped ahead years, or they could have put up some title card in there, or hell, here's what I really would have preferred. Ator is raised by Grendel, and go figure, Grendel turns out to be a raving sadist who hides the broken pieces of Prince Ator's sword to keep the new fat Ator from destroying him. But that doesn't mean Grendel can't tease Ator a bit with some fake swords. This movie feels as medieval as a Bert and Ernie sketch.
Soon you will be 18. But I wanted to fulfill my promise in advance.
Whoa, what? 18? Okay. This guy's about as 18 as George Burns. No wonder this guy tries sounding like an 18-year-old throughout the movie.
Not even the sword is enough to defeat the king of the gods.
I understand that now.
I like how it seems like the only person who knows how silly this movie is the guy doing the music, because whenever the goblin comes on screen, the soundtrack gets really zany. And sometimes the music will sound all fantasy epic, like it should, but once that goblin comes on screen, it immediately changes over. Good God, if they wanted a haunting monster theme, why don't they just put in some stock music? Also, it should be known that this goblin comes across so ridiculous that at one point, I get the feeling that even a crow starts laughing at him. Ator's mission in the movie is to gain the Sword of Power, to avenge his father's death, and to free this female warrior who was captured and put under a spell earlier in the movie. I don't know how to describe this actress's performance, other than I get the vibe that she starts speaking her lines just as her heroin dose begins to kick in.
Do not kill Ator, Thorn! He has shown wisdom in all his doings.
Ator finds the pieces to his father's sword and destroys this fucking Troll 2 mask before it can do any more harm to any other movies in the future.
Here's your toll, troll.
Now it's up to Ator to roam the lands on his quest for the mighty sword, even though he has that sword now, making that quest over with. So now he's on a quest for barbecue? Ator meets up with some new friends at a local cantina, where Ator sits and watches a prostitute get smacked around for about 60 seconds before ultimately intervening. I can only assume he was waiting for his cheese fries to pass. The rest of the movie is padded out with whatever monsters they can think of off the top of their heads to throw at Ator and his crew. Oh yeah, speaking of heads, they get attacked by a two-headed robot! Aw, come on, you've got a scene with a two-headed robot. Did you really have to make the scene any more slapsticky by having them get stuck in a door? This is more like the two-headed monster from Sesame Street.
Oh, la riva sa viva viva. Dice, no le fue.
At one point in the movie, I'm pretty sure Godzilla turns up to breathe fire on our heroes. This is a little weird, seeing how I've never seen a Godzilla costume in its exact size before. It feels more like I'm watching Ator battle a Gorn. If only he knew how to make his own gunpowder, this scene might get over with quicker. There is so much filler in this movie that the villain named Gunther doesn't even turn up till about an hour into the movie. Ugh. I think that if they ever made a sequel to that Super Mario Bros. Movie, this is what Wart would have looked like. And even after Gunther shows up, they add even more filler by having him repeat his lines via poor editing.
Take it away! Take it away!
Good work, Joe. Now your movie is 2 seconds longer, and it's already 90 fucking minutes! Oh, and as you can see here, just in case they didn't get enough usage out of their Troll 2 masks from earlier, another fucking goblin shows up as the henchman to Gunther.
If you will permit me, Your Majesty, I suggest you prepare yourself properly for the encounter. As you know, the first impression is the one that counts.
Yeah, that's what I always assumed the Troll 2 goblin sounded like. Thomas Hayden Church? Ator finally meets back up with his mother, who goes from being young to being old while in his arms. He burns her body, and I get the feeling that it isn't because she's dead and that's just tradition. I think he's punishing her for leaving him with that fucking goblin! Either way, I get the sense he's about to go off and slaughter some Jawas. One thing that I notice about this movie is how little swordplay there is in it. Every time Ator swings his sword, it's always in the same motion, as if that's the only direction he got. Swing the sword around a couple of times, and if it hits something, then perfect! Or maybe the sword is just way too fucking heavy for its actors to use as a weapon. That could be why we have this scene of Ator and his lackey just watching other people swing their swords for 2 minutes. This isn't filler. This is just Ator picking up tips on how to use his weapon. Doesn't matter anyway, because they suddenly give Ator the power of drawing an entirely new weapon out of thin air. Then why the hell didn't he just... You know what? Never mind. That isn't the most unrealistic thing I've seen Ator do in these movies.
Oh, come on!
Terrific.
I think the biggest disappointment about this movie is that it has its original opening credit sequence. When I think of Ator, I think back to that ridiculous Film Ventures video release of Cave Dwellers that used stock footage from another movie as it put in its own credits and alternate title. But the best thing about the Film Ventures credits, though, is that they're so cheap that even if the movie you're watching doesn't have them, it'll only take you about 5 minutes to make your own. Hell, just throw in your own alternate title while you're at it. Wouldn't you figure that with this being the last film to carry both the Troll and Ator titles, that it has a fucking open ending? Given that both Film Mirage and Joe D'Amato are not part of this world anymore, I don't think that any kind of Troll 3/Ator 3/4 Quest for the Mighty Sword of Power follow-up is ever going to happen anytime soon. Although, we still do have Claudio Fragasso.